Welcome to today Undocumented and Undeterred Dreamers. Today I'm joined with Nancy and Cristel, and a little bit in a short moment they will be introducing themselves. My name is Darwin Velasquez. I am the Senior Dreamer Coordinator at College Track. College Track is a national nonprofit that supports students pursue a college degree with the hope that they continue on to college and pursue a career. I am an undocumented student myself, I am an undocumented. I came to the country at the age of 12, became the first one in my family to ever go to college, learn English, and at the same time, join College Track to go to college. So I graduated from the University of San Francisco, and now I'm here at College Track. So today for our conversation, I bring my professional and personal experience to this conversation today. So I will let Nancy introduce herself today.
Thank you so much, Darwin, and thank you to everyone. We're so glad that you're joining this session today. My name is Nancy Jodaitis, and I work as a Director of Higher Education at Immigrants Rising. We're an organization that's dedicated to empowering undocumented young people in their college and career path. And I come to this position with a long history of advocating for social justice and educational equity, including building pathways to higher education for traditionally underrepresented populations. I am deeply committed to helping colleges and universities build institutional practices that support undocumented students in not just entering, but succeeding and graduating from college. And I also create educational resources to support that work. Although I'm currently delivering trainings on a statewide level and research on a statewide level, my work began helping one student figure out how they were going to be able to pay for college at a four-year public university. And I'm really honored to be here today with my colleague, Cristel, and she's going to introduce herself now.
Thank you both, Darwin and Nancy, for all the amazing work that you both do. My name is Cristel Martinez, and I was born in Honduras, and I'm currently an immigration attorney. In 2019, I opened my own law firm, and we specialize in removal defense. A lot of our clients are DACA-mented, which means they apply for DACA and were granted DACA. And also a lot of our other clients are applying for DACA for the first time. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Cristel. It is clear that all of us have traveled our very own journeys to getting here today, and I suspect many of you listening today have as well. Undocumented students have incredible potential, and yet they face countless obstacles to live a life free and work and learn freely as free citizens. And so let's start here to having a fuller understanding of the situation today. So Nancy, take it away.
Thank you, Darwin. First, I just want to begin by stating that I believe, and I know that many of you also believe, that immigrants' rights are about basic human rights and freedom, because people should be able to free to pursue their dreams. Today, there are 11 million undocumented young people or undocumented people living and working and building communities in the United States across the entire nation, living without basic protections, under the threat or the fact of deportation. These are the same individuals who are the backbone of our economy, have cared for our seniors and children, created highly successful entrepreneurial activities, and constitute many of the essential workers that have helped us as a nation get through this pandemic, even though they have actually been excluded from much of the pandemic relief. 98,000 students actually graduate every year from the United States high schools. This number, taken from the Migration Policy Institute and the President's Alliance, is actually up from the 65,000 numbers of students that we were quoted for years that was taken from the Pew Institute research. It's estimated that only 5 to 10% of these students actually go on to college, and only a fraction of them graduate. It's against this backdrop that I elevate those who have successfully navigated these barriers, and I honor their accomplishments by working to ensure that they are not the only ones. But I know that there's a legal background that we're thinking about as well. Cristel, tell us about that.
Yes, to follow up on the legal aspect of those 11 million undocumented people, Recently, President Biden introduced the U.S. Act of 2021, which will set a course for naturalization while seeking to reverse former President Trump tight immigration policies. So this would include providing an 8-year path to citizenship for over 11 million undocumented immigrants if it becomes law. So those living in the United States without status as of January 1st, 2021 could gain a temporary legal status or a green card in 5 years. To do so, they would need to pass background checks, pay taxes, and meet other requirements. Biden has merely introduced the bill, so to become law, the legislation still needs to be moved through the proper channels. As an immigration attorney, what is my realistic opinion about this? We've seen similar acts before, but unfortunately, it is really, really difficult for them to actually become law. So my honest opinion is I don't think it will pass, or at least not in the coming months or even maybe years. The last immigration reform was passed in 1986, just to put it in perspective. So we need to take action, and we will be talking about what can we do to help with that.
Thank you, Cristel. So let's dive into some of these factors. What are some common challenges that undocumented students are facing today, and what are some common misconceptions about them? So let's start with Nancy.
Well, in terms of academic challenges and misconceptions, I think one of the things that is really challenging students across the nation is that there are so many different situations. People often talk about DACA, which is affords certain protections, and Cristel will talk about that in more detail. But DACA is not the entire sum of undocumented students. It's really important to recognize the differences. Financial challenges are usually one of the biggest ones that students face. They are all ineligible for federal financial aid. Different states have different eligibility for in-state tuition, for state-based financial aid. But the thing is that's really important is that laws, although there are laws across many different states, laws don't equal access. Implementation is actually very key. Too often, students are being faced with a lack of information or given misinformation, asked whether they actually applied for the FAFSA when they don't have eligibility, and don't realize that there's actually scholarships that don't require proof of citizenship. So institutions really must constitute systemic responses, and it's not the responsibility of individuals to actually be able to come up with the solutions. We as educators, we as a nation, we as policymakers, but also administrators need to create these changes. And I think that it's also really important, one of the challenges that many undocumented young people face is that entrepreneurship is an option for many, but often students are led to believe that if they don't have work authorization, there's actually not a way that they'll be able to put their amazing skills to use. So I think the sum of this is really important in terms of there's many different challenges, financial, career opportunities, and others that students face, and institutions really need to come together to be able to create these solutions. Cristel, what are some of the legal challenges?
Yes, I definitely agree with everything Nancy said. I am going to talk about some of the legal misconceptions for DACA-mented students. And let's remember, as Nancy mentioned, we have hundreds of thousands of DACA-mented, but we also have many other thousands that don't even have DACA. But to start with the misconceptions regarding DACA, what DACA is, it's a protection from deportation. It provides the individual with a work permit and a social security card. It gives permission to travel after you apply and are granted, and it's only for specific reasons. And in some states, being DACA-mented means you qualify for in-state tuition. So what DACA is not, it is not an immigration relief. It is not permanent lawful status or a path to citizenship. It doesn't give access to resident benefits, such as student loans. It is not a travel visa, and it's not available to all dreamers. That's the legal aspect. But I also want to mention what is the other misconceptions or other challenges that this DACA-mented and the non-DACA-mented students face is the stress from the resulting insecurity of what's going to happen with DACA. We've seen it recently where there's been multiple lawsuits and the program is taken away, comes back, taken away, and just having that insecurity of what's going to happen in your future puts a toll on those students, and especially on those students that don't even have DACA.
I would like to say that the state-by-state variation as to support services. So, for example, someone from California compared to someone in Louisiana or Maryland, and again, I'm not trying to pick on these states, I'm just giving an example here, may not have the same access to careers in that particular state. So it's very important for you to do a little bit of research as to the specific careers that the students are interested in going, or specific fellowships or internships that the student is interested in going, so that those opportunities become available to them, hopefully. The second piece here is also language accessibility. And the resources don't have to be just in Spanish, they can be in other languages as well. But I would encourage you to look at your institutional website to see if you have anything available besides just English, or any resources that you're sharing with your students and families, if they're strictly in English. If they are, I highly encourage you to make them available in other languages. So let's go into what are the actual things that we can do as educators to support undocumented students at our current institutions. So what are 2 or 3 things that we as educators can do to support undocumented students? And let's start with Cristel.
Well, as an attorney, I always tend to go to the legal aspect of it. But I think education is the key. So educating yourself about what DACA is, what students who don't have DACA go through. And I think just being here, part of this panel, it's a first step in learning the difference and how the students are affected. But also as a sociology major, I also care about the emotional support. The trauma and insecurities that these students face, the documented and the non-documented, it's a lot. It's a lot to have to deal with so many obstacles that other students don't have to face. And also the insecurities of if that program will continue, if you're going to be able to keep your social security and your work permit, if you're going to lose your job because you're not going to be able to renew that work permit. So emotional support and education would be my suggestions, but I know Nancy has more.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I do think it's really important, the emotional support that you're talking about, Cristel, is vital. You know, if you think about the last 4 years that students have faced, even those who had DACA was taken away, it was back, it was taken away. That causes a lot of stress. So I really want to re-emphasize that area of emotional support and really kind of understanding some of the trauma that our students are living through. I think in terms as an educator as well, one thing that's really important is to make your support visible. Don't wait for somebody to have to self-disclose to you so that a student actually knows that you are a safe space. I've been working with undocumented students for almost a decade now. Students actually are listening for cues to know when they think that there might be safe enough to actually disclose their status, because often they've been told, don't tell anybody, right? This could really create problems. So in creating a safe space, making resources easily accessible so that when you are, and also making sure that you don't really pigeonhole who you think is undocumented, because undocumented, if you listen to the news, you might think that undocumented is really an issue that is only a Latinx issue, when in fact individuals, from Asia, from Africa, from Canada, from Europe, from all across the world are coming. So making sure that we just speak openly and say, can you put up a poster that says, I support undocumented students? My organization created a poster that just said undocumented students can go to college. These are just really tangible steps that I think are important. I really emphasize also what Darwin and Cristel said about learning relevant institutional policies and legislation. There's a great website, which is uleadnet.org, just uleadnet.org. And they have a national map where you can click on the different states and see what are the opportunities for students. And then really advocate for and find scholarship information. Immigrants Rising has a great scholarship list, but there's lots of different organizations that promote scholarships. And how could you maybe start a scholarship at your school? And I also just definitely encourage you to reach out to other educators. There's a lot of work you can do yourself, but there's even so much more work when you work in partnership. How can you build some of those connections together? And also, how can you connect with organizations like the President's Alliance, Immigration and Higher Education? That's a conjunto of presidents from across the United States that are working on this. And then really seeing how can individuals access reputable legal information and find out information about entrepreneurship. There's so much more that all of us can do. And then really trying to see how can we help students tell their stories in powerful ways that they get to decide when and how they want to share their story and for what use they would like to share that. And then connect them with role models. My Undocumented Life, Define American, Things I'll Never Say. These are great spaces to be able to help students build agency and power.
Thank you, Nancy. I personally came to the United States at the age of 12 with my brother, immigrated here, and I wouldn't be speaking today if it weren't for those educators in my life that were able to take that additional step. I know that learning English was extremely difficult for me, and something that I really appreciated from my teachers and professors as well in college, of them taking the time to give me advice how to perfect my writing. And that really helped me put out the best college application, the best essay for me to get a better grade, the best of me out there when I was applying for scholarships. And that was extremely helpful. I also suggest that you take the time to write a letter of recommendation for your students so that they can have a chance at earning a few extra dollars so that they can pursue a career and help themselves and their family. But lastly, I also suggest that you share the resources that you come across with your colleagues so that they are also aware of the resources available. And lastly, Nancy alluded to the scholarships part, but on top of that, I also suggest that the scholarships that you're sharing with your students maybe do not require a social, or that the ones that do are targeted towards your undocumented students if you're sharing them, because a lot of times I came across a lot of scholarships that came to mind and that people share with me, but a lot of times they ask for a social or they didn't accept one with a social. So ask the scholarship provider themselves if they are open to having their dollars available for undocumented students. So let's go around and let's share a story of the impact that we as educators can have in the student's life to get to college, but also to graduate. And let's start with Nancy.
Thank you, Darwin. I think those are all just great, really tips that you provided. I mean, for me, when I first became the founding advisor to an undocumented student organization, I met an incredibly determined first-time freshman who wanted to actually go ahead and get a PhD in the sciences. My university was not his first choice, but it was the one that he could afford because this was before the California Dream Act, before DACA, before support services were actually beginning to be institutionalized on the different campuses. He quickly assumed a leadership position within the student club, showed great initiative, courage, and commitment to other undocumented students and their families. However, academically, he was facing a hard path ahead. Many of the sciences get their grant funds through national sources, so they were not available to him. And so when this happened, I didn't have all the answers, neither did he. But as he faced barriers, we realized that we didn't know how to solve. I continued to be a space for him where he could speak honestly, express his feelings, and not just be listened to, but really be heard and understood. And although at different times I felt so helpless and frustrated about my inability to change things, I came to learn that being that safe and brave space to him was really invaluable. In areas where we could collectively build solutions, he made sure, and we made sure collectively, that we were opening doors for others in the future, and that we looked to build bigger solutions. Like he actually went on to co-found an organization that supports medical students that actually, undocumented students that want to be in medical fields. And, you know, I think that 10 years after I met this student who wasn't sure how he was going to be able to actually pursue his studies in the way that his brilliance deserved. He graduated from the University of California with a PhD, debt-free, in pharmacogenomics. And so while his graduation from a top university wasn't a huge accomplishment, it didn't come easy. And I share this with you because you never know how the support that you provide to one student can actually spark a movement beyond your campus and beyond.
Thank
Cristel,
you, Nancy.
tell me about
that story. Yeah, that story is so special to me because I can relate to it. As I mentioned in the beginning, I was born in Honduras. What I didn't mention is that I was an undocumented student till I obtained my bachelor's degree. And then I became documented when I attended law school. And maybe that's why I emphasize on the emotional support and not so much the legal support that now I can give as an attorney. I remember when I was in community college, I had one professor who changed my life. She was the first professor in college that I told I was documented, and she had no idea what that was. But like Nancy mentioned, she gave me the space. She took the time to learn how she could help me or figure out ways that I could apply for scholarships. And she gave me that push that I needed to actually attend law school. When I went to law school, same thing. I was the first undocumented student who attended that law school. So they had no idea how to help me financially. I told them, I need the money, so I need you to create a scholarship for me. And that's what they did. They created a need-based scholarships for students like me, who, even though I had a social by that time and a work permit, didn't qualify for federal loans. I still don't, and didn't qualify for other scholarships that were available. So those two things, I guess, the support from my professor, willingness to learn, willingness to listen to me, and also, I guess, the courage that she gave me. So when I attended law school, I could tell them, you need to do something to help me. Those are the I guess, that's what other students can do, but also as supporters, you can tell students that they can do that, and they should.
Thank you, Cristel. Your story is so inspirational to all of us. At College Track, we assigned advisor volunteers for our students who are undocumented and and all of those who are documented. We assign them an advisor that helps them with their college writing, or go on college tours, or anything related to college. And so Tony, my greatest mentor, started advising me since I was a senior in high school. And at that time, it was a critical time in my life because it was the first time that I experienced depression, because I was so behind academically, I did not get into any universities I applied to straight out of high school to college. And so I had to face the circumstance to go to community college. In all the 4 years in high school, all I heard was, if you go to community college, you're a loser, you will never make it out there. And Tony was there by my side, encouraging me to continue on with my education. And so I did. I went to community college, and through my community college, I actually ended up studying abroad in Paris, and then transitioned to the University of San Francisco, and later became the first one in my family to graduate from college. And now being in a position to support a significant number of undocumented students across the country through the work that I do with College Track. So go out there, support your students, encourage them, be there for them. And one small action that you can take out of today's conversation is a huge difference in the student's life. And so I encourage you to connect with us, and I'll leave you with Nancy, who would share some resources that you can access as educators.
Yeah, thank you. This is our contact information. And then if you go to the next slide, you'll be able to see that we have at Immigrants Rising, immigrantsrising.org, top 10 ways to support undocumented students, a guide to building on-campus services, a confidential legal intake service, inspirational posters to make your support visible, ways to strengthen your website, and a guide for those, and many, many more. So please visit us, immigrantsrising.org. It's such an honor to be here with each of you, Darwin and Cristel, and maybe we could just go back to the slide that shows our contact information in case anybody wants to reach us. Thank you so much to everyone today. We so appreciate your being here. Thank you to Darwin and to Cristel for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you,
for
South
having
by
me.
Southwest.